On paper, the Lakers should not be this good, but I think they are. The roster isn't as deep as some of the other contenders, and the defensive flaws are clear. But this team is still going to be a real player in the Western Conference. Luka Doncic is heading into a revenge season, and LeBron James, even in year 23, will probably still be a top 15 player in the association. So let's break down the pros and the cons of the roster and figure out just how good the Lakers can be this season. So let's start off with the positives for the Lakers going into this season, because there are a few big reasons as to why I think this team can once again put themselves right in the mix. And the biggest one, without question, is Luka Doncic. All off season, we've been hearing about how he's getting himself into the best shape of his career, and if you watched him at Eurobasket, it looked like the best version of Luka we've ever seen. And honestly, I don't think it was particularly close. Luka averaged 34.7 points, 8.6 rebounds, and 7.1 assists per game. And what makes this even more absurd is how the Eurobasket games only go for 40 minutes. That's 8 less minutes compared to the NBA, and yet he still put up these godly numbers. And on top of that, Slovenia basically had no NBA level talent apart from Doncic, and yet he still dragged them deep into the tournament against teams with NBA level guys. But what stood out to me was how athletic he looked. He had moments where he just grabbed the ball, went coast to coast, and then finished with ease. I mean, that's the kind of play that we didn't see him make last season. That added burst, combined with his improved conditioning, is going to do two major things: help him keep his energy up late in games where he's historically worn down, and ideally keep him healthier throughout the season. If Luka has more left in the tank for fourth quarters and can hopefully avoid those nagging injuries, that is a terrifying thought for the rest of the NBA. And that's before you even factor in the extra motivation he's undoubtedly going to be entering this season with, because this is a revenge season for Luka. The way Dallas shipped him out was embarrassing, because they did have their reasons, mainly around his conditioning and durability, but it was still stunning to see a guy of that caliber moved for virtually nothing. The Mavericks wasted no time bashing him in the media after the deal, calling him out for being out of shape, questioning his defense, and basically painting him as the ultimate problem they had to get rid of. And if there's one thing that we know about Luka, it's that he takes this stuff personally. He is one of those ultra competitive guys, and it feels like he's used that criticism as fuel. Now he's in the best shape of his career. He's out to prove that he can stay healthy, and most importantly, stick it to the Dallas Mavericks. A motivated, locked-in Luka Doncic, already looking like he's back to being a top 3 player in the world, is probably the biggest pro of any team that I'll cover in these previews. But of course, that's not the only positive that I have for the Lakers. They also still have LeBron James. Even in year 22 at the age of 40, he made the All-NBA second team, averaging 24.4 points, 7.8 rebounds, and 8.2 assists, doing it all on 57% true shooting. Those numbers are absurdly good for anybody, let alone someone in their 40s. Every year, we ponder whether Father Time is finally going to catch up, but it just hasn't happened yet, and there's no real reason to think that this season it suddenly will. What made things even scarier last season was that for the first time in his career, LeBron actually became the second option. Instead of struggling in that role, he leaned into it, setting screens for Luka, making smart reads as the roll man, and doing all the little things that made their offense really click. A lot of people questioned whether or not he and Luka were going to be able to coexist, but the numbers showed that they did. When they shared the floor, the Lakers had a plus 3.4 net rating over more than 1,000 possessions, with a 120.3 offensive rating, good for the 86th percentile in the league. The ball movement was clean, the shot quality was elite, and it was clear that this duo just clicked offensively. Their issues weren't on that end of the ball, as it had more to do with their defense, which we'll get into later. And then the final positive for me is that even with the flaws last season, the Lakers were still good enough to finish as as the 3 seed in a completely loaded Western Conference. Yes, the gap between the 2 and 8 seed last year was only 4 wins, but they still finished 3rd nonetheless, finding ways to consistently win games in a crowded field. I expect a similar result this season, with Luka potentially putting up something close to a 30-point triple-double and LeBron not showing any major signs of slowing down. The Lakers are going to have enough offensive firepower to continue to rack up wins in the regular season. In the West, where every game is going to matter, that consistency, I believe, is a massive advantage. But now it's time to flip the coin and look at the negatives for this Lakers team going into the season. Because as good as I believe they can be, there are definitely 3 big things that will hold them back. Hurdles that they'll have to navigate throughout the season. The first negative being their off-season additions just did not outweigh what they lost. On paper, adding DeAndre Ayton after his Portland buyout, Marcus Smart, and Jake LaRavia certainly isn't too bad. Those are 3 decent additions, but what they lost was far more valuable, and that's Dorian Finney-Smith. I can't even begin to explain to you guys just how important he was to the Lakers last season after coming over in a mid-season deal, especially with how well he meshed in the lineups alongside of Luka and LeBron, really tying them together. In fact, there was a 5-man unit with Doncic, Reeves, DFS, Hachimura, and LeBron James at the 5 that completely dominated last year, posting a plus 19.4 net rating over 200 possessions, scoring 130 points per game, and shooting almost 66% effective field goal shooting in that lineup. That grouping was absolutely lethal because all 5 guys could shoot, all 5 could attack, and with LeBron and Luka constantly drawing doubles, there were always clean looks available. And with Dorian Finney-Smith's ability as a 3-point shooter, he was at the center of why that lineup worked, while also arguably being their best defensive player. Losing him, especially to a rival in the Houston Rockets, is a massive deal. And that leads us right into the second negative for the Lakers this season, and that has to do with their defense. Sure, Marcus Smart is a solid defensive addition in theory, and it wasn't that long ago that he won the Defensive Player of the Year. But the reality is, since that moment, he has not been able to stay healthy. So expecting him to suddenly play close to 70, relying on him to be your best defensive player at age 31, just feels like wishful thinking. Ayton, on the other hand, is supposed to be their defensive anchor, but he's never been a reliable rim protector or even a consistent defender. His motor and work ethic have always been questioned, and he's far more comfortable with just taking mid-range spot-ups and hook shots rather than doing the hard, dirty work inside. And let's be real, he's not about to get a ton of post touches in an offense dominated by Luka and LeBron. His role will be as a pick-and-roll finisher, but even there, he doesn't bring the same high-energy presence we've seen thrive next to Luka in the past, like a Derek Lively or a Daniel Gafford. So, if Ayton isn't good enough as their defensive anchor and Smart can't stay healthy, you're left with Luka and Reeves in the backcourt and a 41-year-old LeBron James trying to hold his own as the last line of defense. That's certainly not a recipe for a top-tier defense, which means the Lakers are going to be relying on their offense to outscore teams on most nights. Then finally, the third negative would have to do with their supporting cast outside of the 2 stars. Austin Reeves is a really solid piece, but he wore down in the playoffs last season, especially when he was forced to guard defensively. Ideally, with Smart in the lineup, he could get back to thriving as more of a secondary or even their 3rd best defensive option, not having to guard the top tier guys in the league like an Anthony Edwards. But even against those 2nd to 3rd best scorers, he can still be attacked. Rui Hachimura was lights out as a catch and shoot guy last season and should continue to be really valuable in that role. But once you go past those 2, things really get shaky. Gabe Vincent, Jared Vanderbilt, Dalton Connect, and Jackson Hayes certainly isn't a very strong bench group. However, there is a bit of promise there. Dalton Connect, for example, did show promise as a shooter earlier in the season, but then fell out of the rotation, and he was traded to Charlotte before that was rescinded, as the Lakers clearly lost faith in him, as he never got back into that lineup line up properly. His defense and overall consistency just was not there, and that's to be expected from a rookie. Vanderbilt can defend, but is severely limited offensively, making him a tough guy to trust in the playoffs. Then with Gabe Vincent, he just hasn't been able to stay healthy since he came over from the Heat, as he just had a really up and down year. It's certainly not a horrendous group of talent, but compared to some of the other contenders like an Oklahoma City or a Houston, it just isn't in the same tier. So while the Lakers really do have star power at the top, their offseason moves just didn't do enough to replace what they lost with Dorian Finney-Smith, as their supporting core is just so much thinner than some of the other top teams. Then defensively, they're going to be fighting an uphill battle basically all season. So after weighing up the pros and cons, where exactly do I have the Lakers coming into this season? To answer that, I think it's important to look back at how things ended last season. When Los Angeles pulled off the trade for Luka Doncic, the hype was real and immediate. People were instantly talking about the Lakers as finals contenders. The move was that seismic, and in the moment, a lot of people convinced themselves that somehow Jackson Hayes was going to be a legitimate starting center, and Luka was going to make him good enough for the Lakers to go through and win a title. Now, I was definitely not in that camp, but I also didn't expect them to flame out in round one. I always knew that Hayes just simply wasn't going to be good enough, and JJ Redick agreed with me on that because he completely fell out of their playoff rotation. Honestly, I feel pretty similar about the Lakers this year. I just don't think they have enough on the back line or even on the front line defensively. And as much as people rolled their eyes when Nico Harrison said after trading Luka that defense wins championships, it is true. Now, you don't have to be elite on the defensive side of the ball anymore, but you certainly have to be good enough, at least hovering around the top 10. And I just don't think this Lakers team can get there without making some kind of move at the deadline. That being said, the positives are too strong to ignore. Luka Doncic putting up something close to a 30-point triple-double, paired with LeBron James, who's still playing at a top 15 level, is certainly going to win you a ton of games in the regular season, no matter how shaky the defense is. So for me, my prediction is that the Lakers will finish as the 6th seed in the Western Conference, with their floor ending up in the play-in tournament, and their ceiling, if everything breaks right and maybe they make a move, could be as high as a run to the conference finals, giving them a real chance to win it. But one of their strongest competitors in the Western Conference will no doubt be the Denver Nuggets. And if you want to see exactly just how good I believe they're going to be, then you can watch that full breakdown video right now.